welcome to Your Family Dog, a podcast dedicated to helping families love living with dogs.
Welcome back to the Your Family Dog podcast. This is Tina Spring, and I'm joined today by my wonderful co-host, Julie Fudge Smith. And today we're just going to have a light conversation about kind of dogs and people and socialization and easy peasy stuff that we all tend to struggle with a little bit. So nothing heavy today. We're just going to have kind of a fun, light conversation. So Julie, what are we talking about today?
Well, one of the things we decided to talk about was topics that we have visited before, but with the caveat added in of dog body language in relationship to these situations and how can you best read your dog. So one of the things that we've talked about, probably ad nauseum, is the idea of what we call self-socialization, which is where you take your dog and you go and you sit on a park bench and you just watch the world go by and you feed treats and, oh yeah, look, there's a blue bicycle, have a treat, no big deal. Oh, look, there's a German Shepherd down the street, have another treat. So you're just watching the world go by and you're giving your dog treats and we're just learning to watch the world and then learn that it's okay to be out here and all these kinds of things can happen and it's no big deal. So in conjunction with that, though, is you can start to really notice your dog's body language. When does your dog pay closer attention to something? If somebody comes closer to the bench than, say, 10 feet, maybe they come to 6 feet or 5 feet, what's your dog doing? Is your dog alerting on this person? Are they backing up? Are they leaning forward? What's your dog telling you about the situation that's going to help you to keep him safe and comfortable in the situation? So, for example, I had a friend today who was going over to meet a new client for landscaping. And this client has some big dogs. And I suggested to him that he just don't rush over to the dogs. Don't put your hand over the dogs. Just stop and watch and see what the dogs do. And if the dogs come to you, that's fine. Let him sniff your hand. Don't reach over his head. But pay attention to what the dog is telling you as to what makes him comfortable or uncomfortable. I said, just like if you go up to a person and you take a step towards that person and they take a step back, what are they telling you? They're telling you that you are invading their space at a place that makes them uncomfortable and please give me a little bit more distance. Dogs will do the same kind of thing. So we wanted to talk about the things that we can do to help our dogs feel more comfortable, but how we can pay attention to what they're telling us so that we can genuinely make them comfortable.
Well, and really it keeps everybody safe. It keeps our dogs safe. It keeps our kids safe. It keeps other people's kids safe.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of times we want the world, the heart wants what the heart wants, right? So we want our dog to be happy and comfortable with all the chaos all the time. And sometimes I think that ends up being, I don't know, I'm not happy with all the chaos all the time, right? I don't have an expectation that my dogs love it either.
I don't particularly like chaos any of the time. So, there is happy chaos. Like when all of my grandkids are here, it can be sort of a happy chaos. But I can tell you that my dogs want just so much of it. And then after a while, they're very excited to see the kids and they'll play with them. At some point, each one of them will remove themselves from the situation. Zuzu will come up to my office or Clemmy will go lay on her bed, clearly saying, hey, I need a respite from all this. And it's an unwritten rule that if the dogs walk away or they get on their bed or they do something like that, you leave them alone because they're asking for some space.
Right. And so I used to have in a previous generation of dogs in my life, super social dogs who were pretty much bomb-proof or would avoid a conflict kind of at all costs. So the dog who, when little Billy from down the street, who maybe is a little more ruckus than typical, comes to visit, the dog's like, hey, could I go in the backyard? That'd be great. Or hey, could I go lay in my crate, or can I go lay on your bed? Right? They're good at removing themselves from situations that are uncomfortable. My current group of dogs are not those kiddos, right? And so they've taught me a lot, and they've really changed the recommendations I make to families, in that right now, 3 of our 4 dogs find Christopher and I to really be their people who advocate for them. So when a situation is worrisome, they don't tend to move away. They tend to kind of get clingy to us, which sometimes accidentally pinches them in space, that now they're right next to the UVerse guy. So where I had dogs in the past that I would have said to a service provider, come on in, everything's cool. Now I'm actually managing my dogs significantly differently, so that I'm not putting the service provider in a situation that they're uncomfortable with. Often when I ask service providers, they'll tell you at first glance that they're good with dogs. They're not really good with dogs. They're just trying to be polite. They don't enjoy being mugged at the door either. And most of them have had a bad experience. You know, they've gotten nipped, quote, nipped. And I'm like, no, you got nailed, dude. It was just a polite bite, right? Or they've gotten really scared by another dog. And so they're carrying their own baggage in too. I definitely don't want kids walking in to the 4 dogs we have right now. That would be nutty, because while my dogs are all kind, they're not used to little kids. They're little kids are at eye level. And so I would say generally, not the Doberman. The Doberman thinks little kids are great, the same way that he thinks puppies are great. Like, he just lays down and is like, here, climb on me. And I'm like, no, we're not doing that. But he really is an ambassador for his breed. But it's been a hot minute since I've had those dogs in my world, right? As a longtime professional dog trainer, my dogs are all a little special.
Yes, I can relate to that. I can definitely relate to that. But I find that every dog I've had has taught me something about relationships in a different way. Every dog has taught me something that makes me understand that their personalities are as diverse as human personalities, and that you have to be conscious of what that individual is telling you. There are certain, I think, universals amongst people and dogs, you know, that they can, people frown, dogs' ears droop, that downward sort of movement of the body, the tail
They
tucked.
totally will knit their little eyebrows together.
Oh yeah, totally. On super furry dogs, it's a little bit harder to see
It
than
can be, yeah, definitely.
on your short-haired dogs.
On a Shar-Pei, definitely you got some stuff going on.
That's right.
Or a baby bloodhound. Same thing. Like, you're like,
Well, I just all wrinkly.
It's just your ears pushing your wrinkles forward that you can't see, or what's going on?
That's
And
right.
I will say, like, this really brings it full circle for me with like the COVID thing. I can remember when COVID was going on, everybody was like, oh no, we're going to have all these dogs with aggression problems and lack of socialization and blah, 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 blah. Like, we were like, oh, we're going to have all these problems. I will tell you, none of that came. I mean, I had a couple of cases, but nothing awful, and very, very easily treated, which was interesting because the dogs had a lack of experience. It wasn't that they had negative experiences. They had neutral experiences. They didn't have them. So as soon as we put a positive spin on it and went, well, like, the stranger makes hot dog happen, the dog was like, you're kidding. That's awesome. Turns out I like that dude. Right. So the dogs were really quick with what I have always called soft socialization. It's not the socialization that we are able to get away with sometimes when they're young puppies. But a lot of just watching and taking in information and then reconciling that and going, okay, right? It's kind of, I don't know, it's like introducing someone to Facebook and trying to teach them that they can just move past something that they disagree with, right? They don't
Right.
have to jump in. They don't have to have a big response. They could just go, that was interesting, and move on. And so it's really fascinating to me that the veterinarians who were like, oh, there's going to be these gabillion, like you're going to be up to your eyes and biting. Like, I don't have any of that. I don't have that. I think actually COVID for many dogs stopped kind of the hyper socialization that in this country I have seen a slide into a level of socialization that's not comfortable or appropriate. And so people laid back a little bit. And I think it made it better for dogs because dogs are like, no, I can choose who I want to say hello to and who I don't.
Especially our shyer dogs. I think COVID was really good for shy dogs in the sense that when people took their dogs out, because we had this 6-foot distance, these dogs had this automatic barrier around them that allowed them to be comfortable in society. In some ways, I think it was harder for our really social dogs because it's like, I don't want the 6-foot barrier. Like Zuzu, she wants to go. We don't go for walks in downtown Granville. We go for leans. She wants to meet everybody and lean up against them and tell them that they're her new best friend. So social distance was harder for Zuzu, but it would have been great for Bingley, who liked people, but just you can stay over there and I'll be perfectly happy.
Well,
And so I think for our shy dogs, especially, that was good.
Yes. And I think it slowed things down. Like all of a sudden, instead of having people in our homes, we were standing outside and talking to people. Like we talked to our neighbors a lot, but we did it across the street, right? Out in the sun. So if I had a dog with me, the dog had a lot of agency about space. And I think, well, honestly, I'm 5'3". I get sneezed and coughed on all the time, and I hate it, right? Tall people regularly go to cough or sneeze, they turn sideways, and they end up coughing in my face. I liked COVID because they weren't on top of me doing that, right? And there were a lot of bad things about it too. And I'm not gonna say that it was all sunshine and roses for everybody. There were a lot of ways in which it was awful, but I didn't miss getting coughed on. I didn't miss getting sneezed on. I didn't miss getting stepped on because somebody didn't see me.
Oh, yeah. The stepping on thing, I could, yes,
Yeah.
I get stepped on too. I don't know what it is about the back of my heels that people seem to think that they are, stepped on. I understand. I'm right there with this stepping on thing.
Well, and so to a certain extent, I think it gave me a window into how my dogs view the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Right. Do they get coughed and sneezed on all the time? And do we step on them accidentally? And we complain that they're underfoot, but they're maybe we're just not paying attention the way we should. So we work both sides of the exercise. So did you have a big uptick in like behavior cases because of COVID?
No. In fact, the behavior cases that I had seemed to come from dogs who were I would have expected after COVID that in 21, 22, I would have had 1 and 2-year-old dogs that were having some real serious issues because they were all adopted, during COVID or born during COVID. No, I did not have a huge uptick. And in fact, the aggression issues I had seemed to be more in my older dogs, the 6 and 7-year-olds who maybe did okay during COVID home. Because what?
They were sick of everyone being home.
Yeah. Or maybe, being home, they didn't have the triggers happening to them. Their aggression triggers. And so they became softer. And then suddenly everybody's back out and these triggers are upon the dogs again, and perhaps multiple triggers. So I think for some dogs, COVID gave them a reprieve from those triggers, but nothing was being done to desensitize them to triggers. So that when they were reintroduced, the triggers, they, in some ways, I think for some dogs came back even harder. It's kind of like, I'm a recovered alcoholic. And one of the things that, I know about drinking is that, when you quit drinking, it's not like you reset your body and your mind and your whole alcoholism back to ground zero when you first started drinking. Usually, if you start drinking again, you very quickly fall back into where you had been, if not worse. And
Right.
I sometimes wonder if that wasn't similar to our dogs. They
Mhm.
had a reprieve from those triggers, but when the triggers came back, they responded to them as strongly as they did before, if not more so.
I wonder too. And I would say, like, I don't know, I'm a recovered smoker. I'm right back there, right? Like every once in a while somebody smokes a cigarette in front of me and I smell it and go, ooh,
Yeah.
that smells good kind of thing. And I think to myself,
Mhm.
I would be right back to 2 pack a day, like immediately. I have a dear friend who's recovered from heroin. And he said, if I ever start using, I'll be dead because I will go back to exactly where I left off. Right. And my body's
Yeah.
not prepared for it.
Right.
So,
And because I think addiction is progressive. Um,
yeah.
and so I kind of think that, you may stop at a certain point, but that doesn't mean that your addiction becomes under control.
Right. But I think triggers for our dogs are really similar.
I
Right.
do
Like if,
too.
if I had a dog let's say I had a dog who had a massively bad experience at a situation. I'll give you one. So I had a dog many, many years ago when my daughter was young and still living at home, where she was at track practice. I took our newest dog over to the school to work on some polite leash walking and training stuff and just spending some one-on-one time with him and getting to know him a little bit. He was new to our household, and the marching band was practicing on the far field until they weren't, and they came around the corner of the building, and now we have a wall of humanity and metal and noise coming at us and scared the tar out of this poor dog, right? Like I didn't have a way to predict that was going to happen. Like that would not have been my choice if I had known that that was going to happen, we would have absolutely done something differently.
You have just defined trauma, by the way.
But that's a trauma for him, definitely.
Yeah.
And so and he was a young dog. He was only like 10 months old, right? So like going through
Ouch.
fear stages and a terrier. So he was like, I will take you out. um, but we got him to the point that he could be around a marching band and he was like, ho hum, whatever, it's fine. But I immediately started working on fixing it and normalizing it and making it a party, even though he did not believe me. Right. So a lot of jollying him and going, woohoo, it's raining hot dog as we run away from the band. Um, so he did get to the point. I mean, fortunately, the marching band practiced a lot at the school, so we could go and do exposures a lot at the school. But I do see, like, if I hadn't done that, if I wasn't a dog trainer, if I was just a mama with a dog, right? If I was just the average mama, that would have been a very big, potentially a really big trauma, and one that might have ended up with a dog panicking anytime they heard a marching band, right? At whatever distance, because it really was a scary wall of sound
Yeah. Well,
movement.
I just remember, I've talked about this before with Hudson, our golden retriever, when he was, I don't know, 5 months old, somewhere in there. Um, and he was a sensitive individual, very sweet dog, very socially savvy, especially with people. But a baby gate fell down behind him, crashed down behind him. It didn't touch him, but it startled the bejeebers out of him. And we, and she was like, "Holy cow! Did you know that they bite retrievers because they're very scary?" And it didn't seem to matter. I mean, some dogs get over these things better than others. And, Hudson, for the rest of his life, was very leery of gates. He no longer ran away from them, and we paired it with all kinds of cheese and hot dogs and that kind of stuff. But they never became his friend. He was just kind of like, if you put up a gate, that's fine. I'm just going to stay over here. And so I think that the other thing is I think people need to remember is that you can soften a dog's reaction to a trauma. You can help them get through it. But some dogs are never going to completely recover from a
No.
trauma. And so that's why, getting back to our original topic, why it's so very, very important to understand your dog's body language, understand the trauma, so that when something along the line of a marching band or a baby gate comes along, you can recognize as your dog starts to stiffen or their ears drop or their tails tuck or whatever, like, okay, this is really making you uncomfortable. Focus on me. There'll be lots of hot dogs or liver treats or whatever. It will get you through this as quickly as we can. But I think it's really important to understand that just because you may have gotten over it doesn't mean that your dog has completely gotten over it. And it's up to you to help him to be as comfortable as possible in situations that come along that you may or may not have control over.
Well, and I will say, I think it stuns most of my clients how quickly classical conditioning works. Like they all,
Yes.
seriously,
Yes.
like every single person goes into it going, okay, dog trainer, this isn't going to work. And very quickly. Yeah.
I was going to say, why don't you define classical conditioning just to make sure that we're all on the same page?
Happy to do that. So classical conditioning is helping a dog build what's called a conditioned emotional response to a stimulus. So this is straight Pavlovian conditioning, right? When we think about Pavlov's dogs, right? When the keeper came in the room, a shop bell rang, the dogs received food over a number of exposures. The dogs put together the association that the shop bell ringing meant food happened. And the way that could be measured, that we knew that learning occurred, was that when the bell rang, a dog started to salivate, which is a clear sign, observable sign that the dog is anticipating food. So classical conditioning can happen to the positive or to the negative, right? So if every time Bob walks into the office, a beautiful sticky bun, exactly the way you love it, an amazing chocolatey cup of coffee, and $100 bill hit your desk, even if Bob's a jerk, you're going to kind of like him over time because he becomes a predictor of good things. This is how we change how a dog feels about something or how a human feels about something. The magic is in how is in keeping the learner at a place where they notice, they're interested, but they're not freaking out, right? So if I'm trying to convince a dog who's, believes in his little doggy soul that cutting toenails is we are removing all of his toes, we can't classically condition at that place, which is where I see a lot of people like, here, let me give him cheese while he's screaming and 4 people are holding him down. And I'm like, yeah, no, that's not classical conditioning. That's bad. Stop doing that. Don't do that. 0 stars, do not recommend, right? Instead, we might start with the dog walking around outside of the groomer's shop. When the grooming shop's closed, eating cheese and relaxing. And then going, when they are open, go in, eat some cheese, go out. Go in, eat some cheese, go out. But when we do classical conditioning, the way Pavlov intended, it moves very fast, very, very, very fast, sometimes on a dime. I have had dogs who for example, bark at other dogs on walks that after one training session of doing this, like, we're just going to build an association. We're not going to try to convince the dog of anything. We're just going to incentivize that dog makes chicken happen. That's the deal, right? In one session, the barking goes away and they go for a walk and the dog's no longer reactive. Now, These are people who did not drag a dog low through the valley of the shadow of death for 6 years with the dog having negative experiences that I'm trying to dig out of a hole that's 300 feet deep. These are dogs. It's a relatively new dog to the family. The dog goes for a walk around the block and is barking at everybody. And the family says, we need help with this. And so we immediately get some support.
Yeah,
it's
I had something
how quickly
similar.
It works.
I had a friend of mine whose dog, their flagpole, he was out there with him, and when the flag came down, the flag dropped right on the dog and scared it, right? And so from that point on, he didn't want to go on the front porch, and he certainly didn't want to go anywhere near that flagpole, right? So she called me the second day, and I'm like, okay, I'm on it. So I go over and I'm loaded with salami and chicken and cheese, and because I'm not sure what is this dog's,
love
kryptonite.
language.
Yeah. So yes, as far as I know, it's Vienna sausage. But anyway, I arrive with all this stuff, and we sit on the porch, and he glances over at the flagpole, looks back at me, get a piece of sausage. We do this for a while. Then we open the door and we sit in the doorway and we look at the flagpole and we look at Julie and we get a piece of cheese and we slowly make our way over to the flagpole till finally he's taking fistfuls of chicken and cheese and stuff at the flagpole. And we go back in. He's still on his leash. I open the door and he's like, let's go over to the flagpole. So, I give him the flag. And so I feel like talking about it took longer than what it actually did. I mean, It was, and I think the key is, you're absolutely right, is you got to catch it early.
Yeah.
That's the biggest problem I had. And that's why I think I had problems with the dogs after COVID, were the dogs who were 6 and 7 years old, who finally, they've been doing this behavior and they've been this reactive and they have hated their neighborhood for 6 years. And now you want me to fix it. And that's a much tougher thing to do than to fix the dog who decided that the flagpole is evil.
Yeah, I would say it's still my experience is that the vast majority of the time, I will say that not in a major city, but if we're talking about a dog living in suburbia, we have pretty good success, right? At least getting the dog to the point that they can, without white knuckling, they can just go, you know what, I'm going to ignore that. I'm just going to pretend that's not happening. They're not going to run over and give the people hugs and kisses, or the other dogs hugs and kisses, but they can walk by and look at me and go, you know that there's a dog over there, right? And I'm like, you're right, there is a dog, and it is not a big deal. Like, right. I see it, you see it, I got you. We're not going to go play with Rufus. It's all good. And the dogs do over time go, thank goodness.
Right. And, and you can also do, in addition to treats, one of the things that I have found to be really effective when I'm working with dogs like that is I'm walking down the street, right? If the dog's on my left-hand side and the dog that's coming at me that I think has got a hard stare, or, the dog next to me starting to react to, I move the dog to my right side to give it just a little bit more space from the dog coming at us, and add in the treats, so that I feel like I'm doing a couple of different things. One is I'm giving you some distance. I'm also giving you a little bit of protection. I'm now in between you and that dog, or I'm giving you a little bit more of a visual barrier, right? And so I think that one of the things we need to remember is that classical conditioning works best when you're keeping your dog under threshold. We talked about thresholds before, so that you can help to maintain him being under threshold by doing things like adding distance. Distance is a wonderful buffer. And sometimes it only has to be that 2 or 3 feet that will give enough of a room that the dog can take the treat and relax into the training or the conditioning. Because one of the things I always tell people is, if your dog's not taking his kryptonite, right? He's not taking his sausage, his cheese, his chicken, his whatever it is. We had one dog, zebra meat. That was his big thing.
I wonder where I can get that.
I can't even remember where we found zebra meat. But it's one of those things, is that
I had someone bring me udu jerky from South Africa. They went and did a work abroad and brought back a bunch of udu jerky. And my dogs, she explained it that it's kind of like our venison, right? Like, they're everywhere. Right. It's an animal that shows up in your yard that doesn't try to kill you. But my dogs thought that was amazing. They thought that was good stuff. Yeah. So I will say, think about even yourself, right? Let's say you had a traumatic situation. Are you going to keep re-traumatizing? Like, keep heading back into it in the hopes that that's going to get better? Or are you going to adjust things, slow down, and change it? So,
well, ideally, you're going to adjust, slow down, and change it. But the other thing that you may do is avoidance. Under all circumstances, I will try to avoid the trauma, which can be traumatizing in and of itself, because you are then limiting yourself and your behavior and your exposure, because you're doing everything you can to avoid meeting it. So there can be some extremes to either flooding or complete avoidance. There's got to be a happy medium.
Right. And I will say, what I don't see is people inviting the trauma over and over. I don't really see people doing that. I mean, maybe they do. That's in my experience, that's a little bit of a rare bird.
Yeah.
Like right now, I'm having to have some medical things done that are uncomfortable. And I got to the point that I was really anticipating the pain. But now I'm at a
Gosh,
place
maybe
where I'm
you're
like,
classically conditioned there, Tina.
um, so I got a little smarter about it. Like we came up with some ways, like, okay, here's some things that before we were kind of rushing through what we were doing, and now we're actually doing the opposite. We're taking it a little bit slower, and that's working better. And I'm also getting used to like, okay, this is time limited. Like, yes, this is going to suck, but it's only going to suck for 15 minutes and then I'll be able to ice and take a nap. So, um, so that's okay too. Like I'm willing to make that deal with myself. And I'm also measuring success. So, earlier when we were doing these things, I could not carry on a conversation. I just focused on breathing. Now I can actually talk if I need to while we're doing the stuff we're having to do, right?
Yes, it's
What do
it's a
you
little hard to believe you couldn't talk, but I get
No,
that. I understand.
I
Been there.
couldn't.
I've been there. I've been there.
It was like,
So
no, I'm just gonna focus on breathing.
yeah,
Um,
which is a good thing to do. Breathing's good. Breathing's
which,
good.
which is okay, which is part of why I love that like Leslie McDivitt talks about teaching a dog to take a breath,
Yeah.
right? Like just okay, take a breath. Like just breathe. Because dogs hold their breaths the same way we do, right? So when especially in my experience where they're anticipating that something's going to be uncomfortable,
Hmm.
right? And that tension is not going to make it better, it's going to make it worse. So I guess I'm getting a little bit of a window into our dogs' worlds.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it is. It's a window. It's not a complete and utter immersion into their world.
Right.
But I think we need to remember that dogs experience the same kind of emotions that we do. They have the same kind of reactions to scary and pleasant things. And when we begin to understand, oh, I see. Well, I have a perfect example. The other day, Zuzu got some burrs, and I was trying to gently pick them out of her fur. And she was like, no. So I ended up clipping them out because she really hates it when I pull it. Well, the other day I was in my own garden and I bent over and I stood up and I went, what's in my hair? I had burrs stuck in my hair, exactly the kind of burrs that
Uh-oh.
Zeus. So I went up to Brad and I said, you need to help me because I have all these burrs on the top of my head. And he started pulling at him. I'm like, ow, ow. I'm like, oh, now I get it. Now I understand how unpleasant it is when I pick at them with Zuzu. So I went up and I got a comb and I wasn't going to cut my hair, but I carefully combed them out. But now I understand, okay, from now on, if they're not right on the surface and I can't pick them off easily, I'm cutting them out because I really got a clear understanding about how much it hurts when those little burrs pull at your roots.
Yes.
So yeah, so listening and Zuzu's very sweet. I mean, she doesn't she will turn and she'll like she'll try to back away or she'll just nibble at the hair like mommy stop, mommy stop, mommy stop.
Right.
So I'm now paying closer attention to that. It's like, okay, clear indication this is unpleasant and let's see what we can do to get them out without being unpleasant for you or for me.
Right. So let me ask you this. So if Brad was trying to pull those little burrs out and you had your favorite ice cream to eat, do you think you would be able to let him do the burr picking?
That's a really good question. Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm kind of thinking, what's my favorite food that I would, maybe it was a Boston cream donut, maybe. I don't know.
Right. It's an interesting question.
It is because it was unpleasant, and I think I would find it hard to eat and have somebody pulling at my head. If it were someplace else on my body, maybe, but somebody because they're right on it, like right on my forehead, so him pulling and me trying to eat would not have worked well. So yeah, I think that's another
Interesting.
thing to remember is that it could be where is it located? I think burrs caught on her inguinal area where that hair is much finer. Inguinal meaning her tummy and abdomen area. Pulling those I think are probably a lot more unpleasant than on her outer coat on her back.
Right.
because, so I think probably we need
That
to think about
silky
the fact
hair
that,
always has, it's a different sensitivity.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Jack
So
calls those his pocket
his pockets. Okay.
because he always rolls around and puts things in his pockets, and he doesn't like it when we try to be pickpockets. So
Okay.
about twice a year, I just shear him like a sheep.
Well, yeah, I can understand that. I can
Because
understand
that's
that.
less, because we have to have a compromise. Like, you can't have all those mats, right? So when it gets
Yeah.
to the point that I'm like, okay, dude, that can't be comfortable. Like, we're going to have to do something about that. And he's pretty amenable to letting us do it. We try to take it slow and easy
Mm-hmm.
and help him be comfortable. He doesn't love it, but we have an okay, kind of like the wound stuff I'm doing now. Like, we have an agreement. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
going to scream and they're
Right.
not going to push. Right. So we're good.
Right. It's like with Zuzu, she gets matted. She gets matted on her feathers in the back
Uh-huh.
and underneath her ears and stuff. And I have stopped trying to comb those out because that's just not fair. So she's not a show dog. So if she's got a hole in her feathers, it doesn't matter. It just
Right.
doesn't matter. Right. So I would much rather cut those out, which she's very amenable to that. So if you're amenable to that, then that's our solution.
That's an okay
Because
way to
you
solve
don't,
the problem.
yeah. How do I know that? Because Zuzu doesn't try to get away from me. And she doesn't turn around and nibble at my fingers. And she doesn't, or lick or nudge my hand away or anything like that, which she does when I start to pick at stuff on her. So it's really paying attention to sometimes to those subtle little things that saying I'm uncomfortable. And so that when I do cut them out and she's not unhappy about it, the next time I do it, it's okay. Whereas every time I try to pick at it, it's like, Mom, please, Mom, please, Mom, please. So, once again, it goes back to body language, paying attention to what your dog is telling you. And it can be some really subtle little ways in which they are saying, this makes me uncomfortable.
And again,
So learning what,
if your dog is really sensitive about this stuff, I would absolutely point you in the direction of Cooperative Care, 7 Steps to Stress-Free Husbandry by Dr. Deborah Jones. She's amazing. The book is amazing. The Facebook group is amazing. She has classes that you can take with her on Fenzi dog sports that are even for lay people. You don't have to be a professional dog trainer to take part in it. And you can always improve that for your dog. I
yes,
really think if families would work through that, a lot of the reasons that people reach out to me would be diminished, because the better we get at having a cooperative relationship with our dog, where we recognize that they are a thinking, feeling being with emotions and with things they like and don't love. And the more we honor that and recognize it and kind of find a way to navigate that, where it's something we all can be kind of excited about and we have a good trade going, that the dog is allowed to say, like, no, I need a break. And that we go, great, take a break. That's
yeah.
cool. Take a break. We'll do it later.
And it's also, yeah, and it's interesting to see the difference between the two dogs. Like Clementine loves to be brushed. Brad's really good at starting at a very young age of just brushing a little bit, till Clemmy will come over and Brad will start combing her while we're watching TV, and she just luxuriates in it and she really enjoys it. Zuzu's so like touch sensitive that she doesn't like to be brushed because I think she's just hypersensitive to touch. She always has been. She does not like people touching her paws. So one of the things that I do try to do with her is, like, when she curls up with me to go to sleep, I will hold, if she lets me, I'll hold her paw and just gently massage it. So she gets used to having it being touched and stuff. But each dog is going to respond to this in a different way. So it's just because it worked one way for one dog, be aware of the fact that if you have more than one dog, just like if you have more than one child, I don't know about most people, but my children came out of the womb completely different. You know, they are not the same person. Your dog's not the same person either. So I think we'll do a link. We did one whole episode on cooperative care, I
I think we
believe.
did too.
Yeah. So I will make links for that in the show notes. Also, too,
And it's a great project to work on headed like into the holidays. Like now kids are back. Well, at least here in Georgia, kids are back at school. So
started
moms
this week in Ohio.
are
Yeah.
starting to feel a little bit of breathing room that they're like, okay, like I can do a little bit. If you just do 5 minutes 3 times a day, like seriously, it's a game changer. It's a game changer.
Right.
And it's probably true for us too, right? 5 minutes of walking in the sunshine would probably do me some good. So 5 minutes
Yeah.
3 times a day would be good.
Well, it's funny because while you had your little bit of surgery, I had my third eye surgery of the year.
Ugh.
I'm done with surgeries. Okay, I'm just I'm said that's it. No more this year. But I just wanted to see my doctor for my second follow up. And one of the things on the instructions was they want me to get up and move for 15 minutes every hour for my eye, so that the circulation keeps going. So I'm like, oh, please don't tell me I have to get up at night every hour and walk 15 minutes, because I can tell you right now that's not happening. But anyway, but yeah, I think movement is just a good thing if you can do it. And so go outside. I walk around my garden. I check my fairy houses, that kind of stuff. So
I love that.
yeah. So, okay. So I think in summation here, what we're talking about is the idea of that you can work with your dog. You can learn a lot from your dog. You can help your dog overcome a wide variety of things by slow and steady and paying attention to what they're telling you when they've had enough, when they need a little bit more distance, when I just need a break. And it's pretty easy to tell that a lot of their body language is very similar to humans, which is one of the reasons why we get along together as species, because we can read each other pretty well.
Well, and the
So,
signaling is in many cases is somewhat similar.
yeah.
So where forever we pounded anthropomorphizing out of dog trainers, I think to a certain extent that's an error sometimes, because the signaling is somewhat similar. And if we think in terms of, well, when I turn and look away from something that's unpleasant, how does that feel in my bones and in my emotional body? I think it is probably pretty fair to be like, okay, well, that's kind of how my dog feels too, right? That they're like, ew, I don't want to look at that, right? Like it's gross.
It was interesting. I think it was back in the early 2000s. There was an article in our local paper about human body language and like what people in TSA are looking for, and they were talking about averting your gaze and lip licking and, biting your lip. And I'm like, yeah, dogs avert their gaze and lip lick. And, just, it was really funny. And so when I would talk to people about dog body language, I'd say, look, it's not that different people. So here's what people do. Here's what dogs do. And they're pretty similar, Oftentimes when people are anxious, they look for movements, they'll twirl their hair, or I had a cousin who would rub her thumb all the time. She just would rub her thumb when she was nervous. And I look at our dogs, and sometimes the tail wagging is not necessarily friendly. The tail wagging can be, I'm a little nervous here, and so I need to move something. That little twitching tail sometimes can be not, oh, I'm so happy to see you, but I'm kind of anxious and something needs to move. Or,
Right.
Maybe I rock my head. There's all kinds of things that are very similar to human behaviors. So if we pay attention to that, we're going to understand them and ourselves a little bit better. All right, then.
Sorry, that was a big yawn.
That was a big yawn. I think Tina needs to go take a nap.
I'm like, okay, had the wound taken care of, recorded a podcast, now must go sleep. I don't know how I'm going to work next week.
Well, maybe you're not going to work next week.
I think I am, but I think I'm going to have to do like half days or something, because 2.5 hours awake is about my limit.
Okay. And then I'm like, off you go.
I'm like, I'm going to go take a nap in the car.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us on Your Family Dog, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Your Family Dog. Got questions? Interesting ideas? Visit www.yourfamilydogpodcast.com to share your thoughts.